Welcome to Perfectville, your first place podcast for your Miami Dolphins, part of the Believe Network, presented by BetOnline.ag. I am Sam Marcoux, and he is the two-time Hall of Famer. Of course, I'm talking about the good doctor himself, Dr. Christopher Cullen. Doctor, how in the hell are you, my friend?
Wow, back-to-back weeks, Sam. We're doing this thing, huh?
We are. It must be football season, Chris. The vacations are over. Kids are back to school, and school is in session for the Miami Dolphins, but not to be ignored or anything else. If you're watching this right now, you notice it's not just Chris Cullen, it's not just Sam Marcoux, but it is also, dare I say, Dolphins legend, icon, hero, Greg Camarillo. Greg, how the hell are you, my friend?
I'm doing well, and honored to be on the cast with you guys.
Yeah, it's been a couple of years. You were actually on our show maybe 6-7 years ago. I think you were telling some Ricky Williams stories, and here you are again. First question, before we get to the big story and everything else, I just said icon, legend, hero. What do you prefer? Do you prefer hero, icon? What is your preferred nomenclature in terms of your lore of Dolphins history?
I find it hilarious, but cool. You know, I'll accept anything you want to throw in there, as long as it's got Dolphin in there. It makes me happy.
What do you think, Chris?
It's got to make you like something a lot of people probably didn't do, but you made Wayne Huizenga cry. Like you literally did. I mean, the guy invented like Blockbuster.
Yeah, well, I'm sure Blockbuster made Wayne Huizenga cry at some point, and the Dolphins made Darius Rucker cry. But you're right, Greg Camarillo made Wayne Huizenga cry. He made all of us cry, tears of joy. I mean, Cleo Lemon to Rich Camarillo, forever and ever and ever. Right? I mean, that's it. But I'm going to go hero. I like hero. I think Dolphins hero would be.
I was just in the right place at the right time, and I just like to have Rich Camarillo right across the bottom of the screen. Right,
we will make that happen. We will. We'll get the lower thirds on there for Mr. Rich Camarillo. But no, Greg, happy to have you here, man. And talking ball, we got so many things to get to. But first, before anything else, I need to tell everyone about BetOnline, and that's because BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the Olympics to baseball to Formula One racing. I should have bet on the women's gymnastics team. I would have won some money. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, and even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on the game of blackjack, poker, anything, or unwind with over 150 slots. Head to the website today and get in on the action. Use promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here. And let's start with the big story. This is the story that broke both Chris and Greg while I was in the air without any way to react to this. I actually got the news from Chris Cullen as soon as I landed. He texted me the news. But the big story, Tua Tagovailoa. We had this big bet last week, Chris, about how long this contract negotiation was going to draw out. And you, if I can paraquote, said this is going to go into the season and be a story for 6 months. I said, Greg, just so you know, this is going to happen in the next week or so. So usually I'm wrong. I'm going to absolutely take the win on this one. Tua Tagovailoa signed $212 million, 212.5. Don't forget that 0.5, guys, for 4 years, average annual value 53.1. Just to put that in perspective, Dan Marino, the greatest quarterback maybe in the NFL ever, made $51 million in his career. Tua is now making more than that in one season. Wow, how contracts have changed. What else here in terms of the details? And let's get into it. So it's the fourth annual in terms of annual dollar value behind, let's see here. He's got Joe Burrow, Trevor Lawrence, and I think Jordan Love. Those are the only three that have more per year right now than Tua Tagovailoa. This actually cuts. There's so much to talk to you guys about this. But first things first, Greg, what is your reaction when you see that Tua Tagovailoa signs that extension? We all knew it was coming. Is this a good thing for the Miami Dolphins? It's obviously a great thing for Tua.
Yeah, no, obviously it's a great thing for both the Dolphins and Tua. And Chris, I was aligned with you. I didn't think it was going to happen right away. And I think a lot of that had to do with Tua's injury past. I thought they would try to postpone, make sure he's healthy before we lock him in. But you got your franchise quarterback. You got your leader. He's locked in for 4 more years. And then this is the window. This is what the Dolphins are telling us. They are paying this money for 4 years because this is the window to go get something done. And you look at it pairs up with Tyreek Hill in what we still believe is his prime. He's one of the most dangerous players in the NFL, if not the most dangerous. So you got your guys locked in and what the message is to fans, what the message is to teams. We're bought in. We just gave my guy $250 million, and we're bought in trying to make this thing happen.
Yeah, Sam, right as always. I was, of course. Yeah, I mean, there was just crickets, right? They were like, and of course, last week's episode, we're just like, they're not showing the love, this and that, and here they are. They're working behind the scenes to make them very grossly rich, man. I don't know. I agree with Greg completely. Just such a great thing. It's one thing we don't have to worry about going into the season. Preseason start next week. It's not a distraction. Guys aren't getting asked these questions. Should he get paid? This and that. They get to just put their head down and go play football. And Greg, obviously, you have more experience than I do, but I played into college as well. And it's like, if I don't have to think and I can just play and react, that's when you play at your best. So I think it's just great for the Dolphins and, of course, for Tua Tagovailoa.
Yeah, so just taking a look at this, just some of the details here, like we talked about. It's that annual average value of $53.1 million. I think that's close to over $100 million guaranteed right off the bat. This is going to take him into year 30 in terms of his age. So we have him locked up for the rest of his 20s, his athletic prime, if you will. I think you're absolutely right, Greg. This is the Miami Dolphins are telling everybody, including Tua and the fans, this is the window. The window is open. The door is open. The garage door is open. The back door is open. This is our time right now with Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, all those running backs, a new defensive coordinator with a bunch of studs as they come back from injury and get healthy on the defensive side of the ball to get out there and win. Not only, everyone keeps saying we got to win a playoff game, and I know that's step one, but win the Super Bowl. And that's what it is. And Greg, to your point about you thought this might get drawn out because of the injury history, it's interesting with this contract when I take a look at it. So a couple of things. Number one, there's bonuses for games played. So I do think they address that with this contract. Tua's going to get more money the more games he plays. So it behooves him beyond the regular to stay healthy. So I do think that the Miami Dolphins and their front office staff did take that into account. There's bonuses for playoff games won. And oh, by the way, he gets an extra cool $1 million right on top if they do win the Super Bowl. So there are some performance-based and just show up and play bonuses here for the Miami Dolphins, or really what I should say is Tua Tagovailoa. So I do think the injury history did play into this contract and probably drew it out a little bit longer. I would imagine if you're Tua and his agents, they want to take that language out and try to guarantee that money as much as they possibly can. But at the end of the day, this is a contract that I think is 100% fair for both sides. $53 million on average for Tua Tagovailoa. That shows you right there. He's paid now like a top 5, top 10 quarterback. The stats prove that he's a top 5 quarterback. You look at the cap hit for 2024 is reduced from $20 million, which he was going to play on that 5th-year option, down to 9.5. They free up $13 million this year in case they need to go out and, I don't know, maybe get another offensive lineman. We'll talk about that here a little bit. If they want to go buy, or, purchase something else in terms of a player, or, well, by the way, there are some other players that are going to be coming up for extension soon. Javon Holland, Jalen Phillips, Tyreek Hill, some wide receiver out there who might be looking for a little bit of a contract renegotiation. So there's a little bit of give and take with this contract when you look at the details. So yeah, we understand why it's good for Tua, but I think it's good for the Miami Dolphins as well, Greg. What would you do if you are the GM, if you're Chris Greer and you have $13 million extra dollars in your pocket? Where are you spending that money this season?
Sam, you nailed it. First of all, I thought you were going to say, what would I do if I signed a $212 million contract?
Actually, I want to know that too.
You know what? I want to know that too.
Car I would buy, what flight I would take. This isn't quite as much fun to spend, somewhere in the teens on a football player. It means it's got to be the offensive line, right? Because look where your money is invested. You've got $53 million a year into you've got Tyreek's contract, Jalen Waddle's contract, and then you've got 2 great running backs as well. So what else is missing on offense? And of course, I'm only looking at it from an offensive perspective because I'm an offensive guy. It's an offensive league. They've invested in this offense. You have to protect the quarterback as well. And they've done that in the past by having Tua get the ball out quicker, trying to get the ball to Tyreek as quickly as possible. But now that they've created that extra space, let's protect everything else we've invested in. That would be my mindset as a GM.
I love that, Chris. What about you? Would you go anywhere else other than offensive line?
No, I don't think you can. I mean, we're solid on other playmaker spots and corner, linebacker, and in the trenches. We got a couple of 1-year guys, veterans on the defensive side of the ball, so you protect Tua. I mean, you're not going to buy a Ferrari and not have insurance, so you got to protect the guy, keep him upright.
Yeah, you look at this contract and you look at the cap hit for Tua Tagovailoa over the next 3 years. And really, when you look at how this is structured, this is a 3-year contract. There's an out after that 3rd year if the Miami Dolphins so choose to take that out. I don't know that they will, but they can do that with a little bit of dead cap, but they could actually get out and free up more money if this just isn't working. But I'm going to disagree here. You guys aren't wrong. I think the offensive line is something that we absolutely need to invest in. But the Miami Dolphins have invested a lot in this offensive line over the last couple of years with regards to Teron Armstead being signed, first and second round draft picks. Austin Jackson was re-upped last year. I'm taking a look at this, and I'm looking at the way Chris Greer has drafted. They've always said he drafts for the year ahead of the year that he's drafting at. And I'm looking at people like Javon Holland, who was a second round pick. So he's going to come up for an extension. He doesn't have a fifth-year option. So you're going to have to sign him. He's a young, talented safety who's probably going to be the future leader of this defense, maybe even as early as this year in terms of that vocal leader, that captain. You also have Jalen Phillips, who's coming off a devastating Achilles injury, but he's a guy that you can put him on that fifth-year option, and they probably will just to kick that can down the road an extra year. But I think I'm taking that money, and I'm signing Javon Holland, and I'm locking up what could be a very, very good secondary for a number of years. When you think of Jalen Ramsey, you got Kyle Fuller in there, or I'm sorry, not Kyle Fuller, the guy from Washington. I can't think of his name. Kendall Fuller. Thank you. Kyle Fuller was the Bears. Kendall Fuller. Thank you. And then, of course, you've got Jordan Poyer here on a one-year deal. So I think you have a really good opportunity to lock up a young player on defense. And I love the offensive game, but I think I go defense if I'm spending that money. Now, the real question. Let's get to it, Greg. Where would you spend that $212.5 million if you were the one signing that? You're right. That's a good question.
Man. The worst part about it is it's during training camp. Like you want to sign that in the off season so you could immediately get on a jet and take off.
That's a good point. That's a really good point.
What can you do during training camp? Buy a nice bed because you're tired all the time? I don't know. Oh man, I guess a new car. I'm trying to think of what would excite you during training camp, and all I can think of is just like some good ice cream. But you don't need $200 million to do that.
You know what I would do? But you're right. You want to sign. That's a good point, Chris. I never thought about that. You want to sign these contracts in the offseason so you can go celebrate a little bit. Because what did Tua do? He went out and started throwing the ball on 11-on-11s. He had to go do more work than what he was doing prior to that contract. I guess what I would do is I would take all those bubble players, all those bubble offensive linemen, and I would just have them like carry me like I was some sort of like Julius Caesar back in the day and just throw money at them as they carry me back to the locker room. Maybe that's what I would do. I don't know.
Yeah, see, I'm thinking
I would have happily carried a guy for money back in the day. You throw a couple hundred my way, I'm carrying you right off that field, no problem.
I'm thinking like Greg, but as far as buying a bed, here's what Tua needs to do, especially if Greer's not going to invest in the offensive line himself. Go buy those guys a couple sleep number beds, maybe a massage and a trip to Top Golf, kind of pay it forward a little bit because he's got the money to do it, and that way those guys are even more incentivized to block for him.
That's a really good point. So let's talk about Tua and what we've seen so far. Let's get to the next story. So the big story there. Well, before we move on to the next story, let's just put a nice little bow on the end of this Tua Tagovailoa contract. We all agree this is a good thing for the team. We all agree it's a good thing for Tua Tagovailoa, obviously. Let's just hold our feet to the fire right now. Prediction. What does success look like where we look back at the end of this contract and say, that was a good signing. That was a great signing. That was the right signing for the right price. What does success look like in order for that to pop into your head? What has to happen with Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins for us to look back and say this contract, as you said, Greg, for $250 million almost, was the right call? Let's start with Chris first. What would you do? What needs to happen in terms of success in order for this to be a successful contract?
Yeah, it's a team sport. But I mean, the narrative's there. We got to win playoff games. And I'm thinking, that's AFC champion. You get to the AFC championship game with home field advantage in the playoffs. The AFC is as tough as it probably ever been in decades. I'd love to see Greg's opinion on that. If he remembers a time when the conference was so strong as the AFC is right now, it's going to be tough. And it's just perfect, like Dolphins lore, that we're going to have our franchise quarterback and we're going to pay him. We're going to do the right thing. And of course, it's a gauntlet to get through to our goals. But I'm thinking it's AFC championship at least, Sam. As far as the whole 4 years, it's Super Bowl. Like it's Super Bowl. It's been since 1973. We haven't been since 85. We need to get that done. Like you have to get that monkey off our back, as Steve Young did, years ago.
Yeah, I'm looking at it from two perspectives. One is the money to Tua specifically. He's got to be on the field. Like you can't spend that type of money and have him not playing in games. And so success for Tua is making sure he can be on the field and play quarterback. Success as a team, and I'm comparing it to other guys that have received that similar amount of money. To me, I look at Jared Goff was a successful signing for Detroit. Took him to championship game, NFC championship game. Joe Burrow all the way to a Super Bowl. And so Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence have also signed contracts of a similar stature. And I think the same thing goes for them is if you go win one playoff game, that doesn't do it. Like, I think you have to get to a conference championship to be considered you doing your job as a quarterback. And that's rough and that's hard, especially if you got to meet Patrick Mahomes somewhere along the way. But I think that's what a successful quarterback does. You look at Justin Herbert with the Chargers, same thing. Amazing quarterback. But you got to make a deep playoff run to be considered successful.
No, I agree with that. I think for me, it's Super Bowl, right? I said earlier, people are like, we got to get that playoff win. I'm like, sure, of course, but I want to see a Super Bowl in my lifetime. God damn it. I mean, I was born in the 80s. I haven't seen the Miami Dolphins. I've seen my Los Angeles Kings, Greg, win 2 Stanley Cups. A hockey team, an ice hockey team from Los Angeles has won the cup twice. My Los Angeles Dodgers have done it multiple times. My Lakers, forget about it. They're all over the place. But I can't see my Miami Dolphins win a Super Bowl yet. That has to happen. Otherwise, it's all for naught. It's all for naught. It's my favorite sport, my favorite team in my favorite sport, and we haven't had the Super Bowl in my lifetime. So that to me is what success looks like. Interesting you say that about Trevor Lawrence, because I was looking at his contract and you go, well, I think Tua's better than Trevor. I just do. I think he's a better quarterback. I think he's a better leader. I think the Dolphins are a better team. But the Jacksonville Jaguars under Trevor Lawrence have won playoff games and the Miami Dolphins have not. So it's an interesting benchmark there, but we all agree success looks like at a minimum a playoff win into the NFC Championship bracket, or I'm sorry, AFC. That'd be awesome if he could somehow get the Dolphins into the NFC Championship bracket. The championship bracket when it comes to the conferences and, of course, the Super Bowl. And that's the big story, ladies and gentlemen. Tua Tagovailoa locked up for the Miami Dolphins 4 years, $212.5 million, making more in a year than Dan Marino made in a career. Unbelievable. Good for the Dolphins, good for Tua Tagovailoa, and good for us Miami Dolphins fans. Let's move on to the next story. And the next story here is the training camp. We're into week 2. It kicked off last week, and the defense was far ahead of the offense, which was that the case with you, Greg, when you were playing for the Miami Dolphins? Was the defense always lights out coming out of the offseason into training camp?
All right, we got to address this right away. So first of all, defense is way easier to install and start and play. So it happens all the time. Now, if the offense is whooping ass at the beginning of training camp, the defense has problems.
Right.
It's so much easier to install a basic defense against an offense that say installed 10 plays, 20 plays. Like, it's not a fair comparison early on in camp. So defensive guys are always out there barking early on, flying around because they got 3 coverages that they can handle, and we're running the most basic plays that a Pop Warner team could run on offense. So it always happens. The defense is going to take strides first. Now, about halfway through training camp, that's when you really need to. If the defense is still dominating, then the offense has some problems.
All right, so that's actually really good insight from a former pro, Miami Dolphins hero, Greg Camarillo, saying, don't worry about that first week. We kind of know that. We've always heard that, right? Like, I've never experienced training camp myself. If I go outside in July in Miami, I'm going right back inside, let alone running around. But all of a sudden, Tua Tagovailoa signs that contract. He gets out there, starts throwing the ball around 11 on 11s. And wouldn't you know it, the offense starts looking a lot better. There's a couple of plays to Jalen Waddle that were just amazing. Another guy who's stupidly rich now, right? And rightfully so. You've got Tyreek Hill out there. You've got the running backs that are getting a little spicy out there with the defense. But looking at this week, it's a little more evenly matched, but I'm looking at some of the players that are standing out, reading the reports, and a guy who was beat up a lot last year, Chris, you and I, definitely had our love-hate relationship with him over the last 2 years. Kader Kahu is making a ton of stride, just a ton of strides in this new defense. He's looking like he might be that nickel cornerback, which is where he succeeded as an undrafted rookie free agent 2 years ago. There's a great highlight that they showed it, I think, yesterday against Devon Achane, where he broke up what was otherwise going to be a pretty play on the sidelines from Tua Achane, but last second Kader ripped it out and then stood up and, was getting daps from Mike McDaniel and everybody else. Elijah Campbell, another name that's been around Miami Dolphins for the last couple of years. He had the orange jersey on yesterday, meaning he was the best player the day before. What do you think of these young defensive backs making a claim for themselves when you have Jalen Ramsey, Kendall Fuller, and others in front of them there, Chris? What's your thoughts on the defensive backfield here in training camp so far?
Yeah, you love to see it because, you got those guys that you just mentioned before, Ramsey and Fuller ahead of you that are pretty much locked down the 1 and 2 spots. A lot of dogs are fighting for one bone. So, like, these guys got to come out and they got to play tough. Kahu was that darling his first year, right? Because no one expected anything. And I think us as fans, most likely, because that's what we do, had a little bit too high of expectations for him. And he had to play a role that he wasn't necessarily as comfortable in, or maybe not his strong suit. But you got a new defensive coordinator coming in from the Ravens. According to Armstead, he is using the weapons properly. He's disguising coverages, disguising things, and Kahu to stand out, and Campbell. These guys, that's a big deal for them. A little bit to Greg's part, they got it a little bit easier too. They get to go out and see ball, hit ball, but all in all, you want to hear good things from your young guys, especially when you're pretty strong on top. Depth is key.
So you got
one thing that's a big difference from my era of the Dolphins. I was there 2007 through 2010 versus what you mentioned, these young guys making names for themselves now. The amount of opportunities in the offseason. So the offseason is reduced. There's basically no mini camp. It's all just OTAs. And so in my day, there was way more time for a young guy to adapt and get reps. Now reps are cut down. And so you really have to capitalize. If you're getting 5 reps, you got to make those 5 reps worth it. And so I love stories like this of young guys, Cater Kahu, undrafted, making a name for himself, taking advantage of those few reps that he's getting, and finding a way to get himself out there on the field. It's hard to do in today's NFL. So a tip of the cap to those guys for getting that done and getting their names in there.
No, that's a great point. I mean, you're right. They have reduced the amount of training camp and the hitting and everything else. So you're right. Every rep is worth a little bit more than it was before. And speaking of Cater, actually, before we get to Cater Kahu, because I wanted to get Greg's opinion on this, and I want to get back to Cater because he's breaking up passes, and he's in the middle of some fights that are getting broken up here at camp. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But who was the guy, Greg, when you were with the Miami Dolphins, or just in football in general, that when you went up against in practice, you're like, man, this guy again, he's lining up against me, or he's going to be covering me, and he's just a pain in my ass as I'm trying to make this team. I'm trying to hustle. Who was the guy for you for the Miami Dolphins when you were here?
Oh man. Oh, let's see. I mean, it's not. I'm trying to think of who. The DBs weren't particularly nasty.
Was Jeremiah there when you were there? Jeremiah Bell?
Yeah, like a great guy. Like I naturally hate DBs, Yeah. And so I'm thinking there's Will Allen, Goodman, Vontae Davis, who he talked a lot, but that's not in like a just an a-hole kind of manner. Sean Smith. Nobody that was just nasty. There were now the defensive linemen. There were some linebackers. Channing Crowder was running his mouth. Jordan Porter.
Shocking that
Matt
Channing
Roth
was talking.
was always in the middle of some sort of fight.
Matt Roth is one of like 5 adult males that I'm terrified of.
You should be. He will fight you at any moment for any reason. And you want that on your football team, though. Like that brings you an element to practice that you need. You need somebody that's ready to start a fight, because that brings the dog out in everyone. You can't take a rep off, because if you're around Matt Roth and you're not ready, he's going to lay you out. I'm gonna have to look through my old rosters, because there's always an a-hole in the secondary somewhere, but not come to mind right now.
Did you ever get in a fight in training camp, whether with the Vikings, Dolphins, anybody? You ever get in a scrap with anybody, even like a little tiny one?
We talked about it earlier. It was so hot when you get out there in Miami in training camp and you are just trying to survive. Fighting requires a lot of energy. And so, especially for a receiver, you got to run your route, you got to get the ball, then you got to get into a fight, and then you got to run back. Like, I need 10 minutes off after something like that. So I'd rather just say whatever you're going to say. I'm just going to jog it back to hell. No, I was not a good shit talker. I definitely wasn't a good fighter. So no, man, I don't think I actually got into real brawls, unless there were 2 big linemen right next to me. Then I'd, start something, walk away.
You got your backup, man. Of course. Yeah, do you ever do any kind of mind games? So I'm watching my kid in his high school team, and there's a couple of dudes, just like you said, like dogs, and they do a different kind of shit talk than like I used to. Like back in the 90s and 2000s, it was like face mask to face mask. You're just saying F you, F this, F that. These kids are like psychological now. Like they're doing this like there's this team we played here, Charlotte Country Day, and the kids they have this thing where they're taking their towels and they're like taking off like their waist, and throwing them on the sideline. The coaches would hide them, and that's like trophies. I mean, they got like a football with another team's logo on it that they took, and the kids after the game were getting in their face like, "Give me my towel back. I know you have it. I know you have it." It's actually one of the funniest pictures in the world. I can email you guys, or because I'm not going to tweet it when Kent's in the middle of being recruited. But he has this picture, and he looks like he just has an elephant between his legs, and it's because he has like 3 towels stuffed in there, taking a picture with mom and dad after the game, and didn't tell us about it until we saw it. I'm like, do we need to take you to a doctor? Like, what the hell's going on there? And he's like, oh, it's their towels. I just took it, said their name on it, and it's just psychological. Anything like that?
I'm all for it. No, well, we weren't that creative back in the day, but no, I'm all for it, man. Any little advantage you can get to get in somebody's head, and who are the ones with the short temper, and you obviously grab their towel, do whatever you can within the rules or slightly outside of the rules without getting caught, just to piss somebody off. It's all part of the game.
So
Christian Wilkins was good at that.
I was going to say Christian Wilkins. That seems like he would always taking the towel from Josh Allen and everybody else and pissing them off. And I love that.
Cam Newton's necklace that one time during the COVID season.
Well, Cam Newton didn't need that necklace, so I'm with Christian on that one. All right, so let's get into this. We've got Kader Kohou and who was it? Jalen Wright, the rookie running back out of Tennessee, standing his ground there. Apparently, he's used to the heat because he came from Tennessee there, Greg. But the heat and humidity, so he got into a fight with Kader Kohou afterwards, and the entire team gets in and breaks it up. And this is one of those fights where you're like, okay, you really don't want to fight your teammate, but Tyreek Hill even came out and said, we needed this. We needed that fight. This is one of those things that's actually going to bring the team closer together. And I'm sensing a theme here. We're starting to see them chirp at each other, which is also a sign. You start to see it right around now, Greg, where it's like, all right, we're fighting each other. Who's the first preseason game? Who is it against? We need to go hit somebody other than us.
Yeah.
But Tyreek Hill comes out and says, we needed this. After that practice, Jalen Ramsey, another leader, probably the defensive leader on the Miami Dolphins, has about a 10-minute speech, according to reports, telling everyone, the time is now to shed this soft label for the Miami Dolphins. You've got Jordan Poyer in interviews telling everybody, look, when we played the Dolphins, when I was a member of the Bills, we knew that they were soft, and if we jumped on them early, we could break them, and we would win this game. And then you have Willie Snead IV, signed today by the Miami Dolphins, was on the Chiefs previously, who apparently had come out and mentioned that he thought Tua Tagovailoa was soft. So you have this narrative around the league from players, not just players, but probably coaches, as well as fans and people who are following this in terms of writers and reporters, saying the Miami Dolphins are soft. That's no news to you or I or anybody out here. That's been around the Miami Dolphins forever. What I think is new is not ignoring that or just saying, no, we're not going to do this, but having an actual, seems like a North Star goal of we are shedding this year.
Yeah.
Greg, what do you think of Jalen Ramsey and Tyreek Hill coming out, applauding the fight in training camp and saying, we needed this?
I love it. And every offseason you have a target. You have to have something you're working on to improve. And some people it's we're working on cohesion of the offensive line so we can run the ball better, or we're working on the short pass game, or we're working on the play action. Clearly, Miami's message is we're working on toughness. Yeah. We're working on a team that's going to play with some grit. And if you can get all the way through training camp without a fight, you're not that team. Somebody has to fight somebody. And it's one of those ones where coaches will say, break it up. And they love it. You just see them, coaches beaming when something like that happens. But they obviously can't encourage it. But they love it. The only thing is you just can't get somebody hurt. Right. No fight is worth getting somebody hurt. And there's always that moron that takes his helmet off, or also somebody that punches somebody else in the head. Let's just have a regular old wrestling kind of fight. But it's great. And then the best thing about it is when you come back from practice either that night or the next morning and you watch film, and they're trained to have the film keep rolling during the fight, and you find out who's got your back. You find out who your real teammates are. Who's the dude that's at the water jug that comes flying across the field to join in, or who's the dude that dives in there just ready, just doesn't matter what's going on. Let's just dive in there, versus the guy that that sits there sipping water and just watches the whole thing. Then you find out who the dogs are. And those are the guys that that you play for. Those are the guys you play with. And that all happens because of a fight in practice. So as long as no one gets hurt, man, coaches love that. Players love it.
Shit, I didn't think about the camera angle. I would have punched both of them, pretending like I'm breaking it up, and then hit both of them in the kidneys real quick and then see them fight again. So I would have been a bad teammate. Chris, what do you think? What do you think of this whole thing with Jalen Ramsey with an impassioned speech afterwards and Tyreek Hill saying this is a good thing for the Miami Dolphins?
Sounds like Greg would have loved to play with every major league bullpen. Because every time there's a scuffle, those 30 guys just come sprinting out all the way from the outfield. By the time they get there, it's over. They're taking pictures with each other.
But the effort's there. They're not actually coming to fight someone. They're just like, I got you, man. Let me run out there. I got you.
Well, it has to get to a point too. They know they're on film and they can't look bad because you can't be that guy that's sitting back, chatting with the ball girl, and then everybody else is going to fight. That's your boys, man. You got to go. I agree with Greg 100%. Like, this is totally planted by coaches at most points. They're like, oh no, stop, please don't, because they want to see this happen. They want to see the camaraderie, them getting together and fighting. Sometimes, most of the time, glues these guys together. Like when I used to coach youth football. I mean, like I'd tell these kids, I'm like, there's 200 boys, young men in this school, and there's like 30 of you that are actually out here doing this and doing 2 days and running and bleeding and crying and sweating. You're the only ones in that locker room that know what you're doing and what you're going through and what it takes. And that's why every win matters and every play is important. But you got to know to trust the guy next to you. And if that means 2 guys getting into it, especially someone like who you mentioned is fighting for a job, and a rookie that's trying to show himself, prove himself to these new coaches, coming from the SEC where he's not afraid of anybody and he's played with the best. I mean, yeah, you love to see it, man, as a fan. Absolutely.
Yeah, he's looking good in camp. If you talk about people that are starting to stand out or separate themselves, Jalen Wright, the rookie out of Tennessee,
he averaged like 7 yards per carry in the SEC. The kid's a monster, dude.
Yeah, I don't know how he fell to the Miami Dolphins when he did, but I think that's going to be a mistake for the rest of the league here before too long. Maybe the second half of the year. I mean, the Miami Dolphins just have an embarrassment of riches of talent all over, both Miami on the offense and on the defense side of the ball.
Yeah, they're talking about Chop Robinson's having a really good training camp.
Chop's
too.
doing fantastic too. Yeah. I mean, it just looks, the early returns on this draft class just look amazing to me. Before we move on from the next story and get to the last story of the day, I do want to ask Greg this, because you've been through this. Chris and I have been through it, but we really just talk and point fingers at people after the fact. You've actually lived this life. We're getting through the end of week 2 of training camp. I think preseason games next week.
Yeah.
Where are you at mentally preparing in the season? Are you looking at, you talked about everybody has something that they're looking for in terms of getting better. It could be route running. It could be, making sure you're wrapping up. If you see on film from the year before that maybe that was a little sloppy, whatever the case may be, just in general, broad terms, for the offense and the defense, where should the Miami Dolphins be focused on right now as they head into the first preseason game of the year about a week from now?
It's just execution at this point. Even the preseason games, they're not that great of evaluation tools for the guys that you've seen play before. They're great evaluation for youngsters, for free agents to see how they're fitting into your offense. But for the guys that have been on the team, these preseason games, they really don't mean all that much. But what I do want to see is execution. When you get that shot, are you doing it right? And it's not necessarily things we can see at home versus what you see in film as a player. Like, are you running your routes to the exact depth, to the exact timing? Do you know your assignments? What's your effort level like? Like, all the things that you can't get in practice, as far as, are you being an a-hole when you're blocking? What does that effort look like come game time that you don't see in practice? And that's really what it is, man. The level of competition. Because in practice, you can only get so much, especially in today's NFL where they're keeping players healthy, which I'm all for, but it doesn't allow you to take it to that next level of that aggressiveness in game, that extra contact. Are you the last guy pushing before the whistle? Those little things, that is what you want to see. But honestly, the joint practices could tell me that just as easily as a game could, except for tackling. In defense, you got it. That's the only time you see that is in a game. But the joint practices to me is something I love. I never did it as a player, but it's something I love to see how the NFL is changing, because to me, you get that little edge of competition. How are you going to react with pressure and competition? Yet we don't have to actually go play a game and get people hurt and add games to a season.
Yeah. So let's look specifically at wide receivers. I mean, there's nothing that Tyreek Hill needs to prove. There's nothing that, Odell Beckham Jr. needs to prove at this point, and certainly not Jalen Waddle either. But the back half of that roster, right? You got your number 4, number 5, possibly number 6 wide receiver battles still up for, Willie Snead just came in, which tells me something. What can they do to separate themselves? I mean, Chris and I always talk about special teams, right? If you're going to be a gunner and you're going to run down or whatever the case may be, but when they're actually in Is it as easy and simple as, hey, there's going to be a run play to the right and you're lined up to the left and you're still actively blocking even though the entire action is going the other way? Is that the type of stuff that separates somebody from being on the back end of the roster versus unemployed? Or what would you look for a wide receiver looking to make this team on the bubble?
Yeah, as a backup wide receiver, I need to see a few things. One is, can I put you at multiple positions? Because if you say I'm only a slot or I'm only an X, you're limited use to me, especially when someone's trying to target getting the ball to Tyreek Hill. You got to move him around to keep defenses guessing. So if he's moving around, everybody else needs to move around as well. So as a backup wide receiver, I got to know that you know all the other spots. And I could put you at any really of 5 spots if I had to, but definitely 4 spots. Special teams, especially this year, like we get to see a new kickoff, which I love because the kickoff had become ceremonial. No one watched it. No one cared. It wasn't going to be returned. And now I think it's going to be the complete opposite. Like we're going to see, one, we're going to see returns, but 2, we're unknown as to like how that's going to work. Like I almost want to see, as much as I hate Belichick, I want to see what his brain can do to this new rule and find the loopholes because we're going to see returns. So if you're a backup receiver, you got to figure out a way to be seen on special teams. And I think it's going to play more to smaller bodies on the new form of kickoff and kickoff return than the past, where you just get your big guys out there to block, or linebackers, DB types. And then the last part is just that competitive dog. Like when I put you out there, I want to know that you're not soft, that you're out there, you're gonna bust your ass to go get a run block if that's what it is. If you're in there to go hit a linebacker, go hit a linebacker. And so those are the things I'm looking for. But I can't have a guy that thinks he's Tyreek Hill, but he's the 5th or 6th receiver. That's just not going to cut it.
Yeah, and really that's where the position battle is, because I mentioned 4, 5, and 6, but Braxton Berrios is 100% making this team as your kick and punt returner, as well as Agent Zero in the passing game. So you're looking at maybe 2 spots available with a lot of receivers, including, by the way, they just signed Willie Snead the 4th. So you might be down to 1, depending on how they view him. But speaking of 1, maybe 1 through 100, we talked about the fact that the Miami Dolphins have a lot of talent on both sides of the ball. And it's time for us, Chris and Greg, to move on to the last story, and that is going to be the players' top 100 list. Looking at this right now, I'm assuming the Miami Dolphins, 7 have been revealed. I think they're going to end up with 8 on this list. I'll just run through them right here, and then let's just talk about it. Number 67 out of the 100, Teron Armstead. 65, Jordan Poyer. 63, Jalen Waddle. 62, Bradley Chubb. 60, Raheem Mostert. The Dolphins own the 60s here. 36, Tua Tagovailoa. He jumped up 46 spots year over year, which I think's got to be the biggest jump this season. Number 25, Jalen Ramsey, who I think should probably be ahead of that myself. And they haven't revealed the top 20 yet. I'm assuming, barring some sort of crazy snub, that Tyreek Hill is going to be that number 8 player for the Miami Dolphins that joins this list of top 100. I don't know off the top of my head. I know you guys have done some research, Chris. I think you were. This has got to be the biggest amount of players, or the largest amount of players, that the Miami Dolphins have ever had on this top 100 list from players since they started this, right?
Yeah, I would think so. Absolutely. And going on to this, we know it's player selected, Greg. I think this is a rhetorical question, but obviously getting picked by coaches, by media members for accolades and things, this has got to be top of the list, right? As far as your peers recognizing game recognizes game.
Yeah, well, to me, it's more valid because as a member of the media now, you don't see the full picture. When you study someone going into a game, you see everything they do, and you get to see it from the full 11, the full 22 video. Whereas if you watch a TV copy, you're just not getting the same thing. And so you read the game plans about them, you know their strengths, you know their weaknesses. And so when it comes time to vote, like this is pure respect. If you're making that top 100 list, it means because the guys that you play against and you play with respect your game. So to me, that means that's the most valuable thing you could get as a player, is to earn your other players' respect. And that's why this list means so much.
Yeah, looking at this, 8 players, my math, because I can do math when it's 100. That means 8% of the league's top players are on the Miami Dolphins. Obviously, if we have 8, and I'm doing the math, there's 32 teams. That would mean on average, each team should probably get 3, right? If it was evenly spread out. That means we're shutting out a couple of other teams. Sorry, Bears, because we took their spots. I just took a pot shot at the Bears. That was the last game I went to, was the Bears Dolphins, so why not? Where do you think about the placing of these lists? I mean, I'm looking at Tua Tagovailoa at 36. I think that's probably fair when you factor in all the wide receivers, all the defenders, everybody in this league. And again, he jumped 46 spots. So it's not like he's disrespected at 36. Everyone's saying, no. He has made leaps and bounds of improvement year over year. I think Jalen Ramsey's a little bit low. I think he's a top 20 player. I don't know that he's 25. It's not that far off, but that might be a little bit of a tiny snub. I think Jalen Waddle at 63 is egregious. He's a top 50 player, in my opinion. I think everybody else is fine. Raheem Mostert at 60. Bradley Chubb, considering the injury that he had. Teron Armstead with his injury history. Jordan Poyer, tail end of his career, still a really good player, a top 100 player by his peers at 65. I'm okay with that list. But of the 7 that have been revealed, is there anybody out there, Greg, is it Jalen, Tua, Raheem, any of those guys that you think should be higher or possibly, dare I say, lower than where they came in so far?
No, I think that's respectable. And I think Jalen is looked at always as a pair of Tyreek, which as a wide receiver, if you have Tyreek to your other side, like your job is just easier. And that's no knock on Jalen Waddle because that's just the situation he's in. And now, my guy is an outstanding receiver and well earned for him to be on this list. But I think from a player's perspective, from my own former player's perspective, particularly wideout, you would be graded down having been the pair of Tyreek Hill for so long and having, getting to work off of double team on him and less attention on you versus somebody like Devontae Adams, who been playing without a quarterback, has been playing by himself. So that would kind of, affect how I look at somebody's ranking.
Yeah, I think the rankings are fine, Sam. Honestly, Tua made that huge jump. Honestly, still being in the 30s, though, that's where you look at the little things that the people are kind of picking at. How good is he? Was his record against teams with winning records? 0 playoff wins. Those are the next steps to get you to the top 20, top 15, in my opinion. If you're getting paid like you are as Tua, that's going to be the standard you're held to, and that's just up to him to have that chip on his shoulder, go out and do it.
Yeah, so where does Tyreek Hill land in? He's the best player on the Miami Dolphins. He's one of the best players in the league. Obviously, he's in the top 20. Greg's throwing up the deuces. You're not only
dang, I wish I would have been that smart to think about that was actually Tyreek Hill doing that. I think he's the second best player. I think Patrick Mahomes is clearly the first best player. There's no arguing that. And then if I'm building a team after that, I'm building it around Tyreek Hill. And I know he's 30, I believe, 30 years at this point. But we've never seen a wide receiver that explosive. And now I grew up in the Jerry Rice era, and I watched him, and he was absolutely amazing, but not as game-changing as Tyreek Hill. Literally one pass can infect in the entire game if you can just get the ball to Tyreek.
Yeah, we've seen it. We saw him pick up a fumble recovery a couple of years ago and just run that. I think it was against the Chargers, if I'm not mistaken. Pulled it out of the scrum and just ran for a 7-yard touchdown.
Yep.
So number 2, you got Patrick Mahomes, number 1. So I think a lot of people disagree with you, Greg. Not me, but you got Justin Jefferson out there. You've got, I don't think Stephon Diggs is going to be as close as Tyreek Hill in that regard. But Chris, what about you? You got Tyreek Hill number 2 in the league?
Yeah. I would say top 5 for sure. Justin Jefferson's America's sweetheart right now. Everybody's liking him. He was on the Netflix show Receiver, which was great, by the way. I don't know if you caught that, Greg. That's such a good show. So, yeah, I think Tyreek for sure is up there. He's one of the biggest names, even coming from the Chiefs, but being on the Dolphins now, he's super active on social media. The players love him. And since it's a player vote, I definitely would not be surprised if he's top 3, number 2 for sure. And yeah, deuces.
I think he's going to go number 5. And I don't know exactly who's going to be in front of him, but I think Josh Allen's probably going to get in there. I think everybody loves Josh Allen. I don't. I still think he's, knocking out kids in the first row with his incomplete pass bullshit because he's not as accurate as everyone thinks he is. I think Patrick Mahomes is number 1. I don't think Travis Kelce has been revealed yet. I could be wrong on that, but if he has, then that's pretty egregious as well. But I think Travis Kelce's probably going to sneak into that top 3. Christian McCaffrey is going to be talked about given everything he's doing. So I think Tyreek Hill's probably going to land around in between 5 and 10. That's my prediction. Doesn't mean that's where he belongs. I think that's just where he's going to land, which, look, if you're a Miami Dolphins fan and somebody told you you're going to have one of the top 5 to 10 best players in the league and you're going to have 8 of the top 100 based on what players are saying, I'm okay with it. Take that. Yeah, absolutely. Does this give, last question for you guys before we get out of here in the town of Perfectville, does this put any extra pressure on the team when their peers are saying you've got 8 players in the top 100 on your team? You got to go out and win. Does that put more pressure on the players, Greg?
Absolutely. And this pressure you should want. If you have that much talent, you got to go win a championship. And we talked about what expectations are if you sign Tua to a big contract, what makes that a successful contract. If you have 8 of the best 100 players on your team, and we're looking at 2 of them as wide receivers and 1 of them as quarterback and an offensive lineman, who should stop you? You should feel like nobody should stop you. And the only answer to that is to go win a championship. So yes, there's way more pressure, but that is pressure that you invite as a player.
Pressure makes diamonds, Sam. Absolutely.
What about the coaches, Chris, in your perspective? Does that put more pressure on the coaches when they go, look, we have all this talent. We better perform. We better scheme. We better make sure that we've got the right game plan and calling the right plays at the right time?
Yeah, it's pressure for the whole building. Absolutely. Like the GM's got to make sure he's doing his job and drafting correctly to suit his top players. The coaches need to put these guys in position, the best position to win. And I think Mike McDaniel does a really good job of being flexible with his personnel, which is just great. And yeah, it definitely puts pressure on everybody, man. I mean, even like the equipment staff has to be on it, man. You got these top guys on TV, man. You got to make them look good. Look good, play good.
Yeah, make sure those cleats are all the way screwed in and everything else. I totally agree with that. And by the way, the biggest snub, I didn't even think about it because I mentioned him earlier, Javon Holland, not on this list. I don't know what the other players are doing, but Javon Holland, come on, guys, he should be there. But, I don't know, Greg, was that I wonder if that would make him have a little bit of a tactical advantage in terms of renegotiating the contract or extending it. If he's like, hey, look, I'm the 75th best player in the league. You better
pay me.
Pony up. Maybe. Well, I don't know about that, but what I do know is that we've talked about the big story, the next story, and the last story with Miami Dolphins hero.
Oof, wow.
Greg Camarillo, as well as the two-time Hall of Famer, Dr. Christopher Cullen, and myself, as part of the Believe Network, presented by betonline.ag. Greg, anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, fellas, I happy to have joined you. Like you just mentioned, I have such high expectations for a Dolphins season. And now I live on the West Coast, so I feel like a Raiders fan saying that every year because then it never works out. But hey, man, like if they don't do it this year, when are they ever going to do it? So this is the year.
I'll tell you a great story before we sign off here. I was doing comedy. I still do comedy. And I was opening for Bruce the comic. And I was talking smack about the San Francisco 49ers. And I get off stage and Gary Payton, the Hall of Famer, Gary Payton, NBA Hall of Famer's there. And he grew up in Oakland, big Niners fan.
Yeah.
And I grew up a Lakers fan. And he comes up to me and says, I didn't appreciate those Niner jokes. And I said, well, Gary, I didn't appreciate you teaming up with Karl Malone, Kobe Bryant, and Shaquille O'Neal and somehow losing to the Pistons, right? And he goes, well, I guess we're even. I go, we're not even. Chauncey Billups ate your line. But the next night, same club, I go, well, you never know who's in the audience. So I'm not going to do Niners. I'm going to go easy on the Niners. I'm going to go Raiders. And I start talking smack about the Raiders. And I get off the stage, and the entire staff of Tommy T's Comedy Club is laughing hysterically. And I'm like, what? And they go, you got to come upstairs. I go upstairs, and about half of the Oakland Raiders at the time are upstairs, including Michael Crabtree, who's on the Raiders. And I went to go shake his hand. He threw a napkin at me. I caught it and said, that's called a reception. And
nice.
And Crabtree left. So I feel your pain about saying I feel like the Raider fans saying that this is our year every year because, say what you want about Raider fans, but they are very optimistic right around this time of year. Every single time.
Hey, Tommy T's. I'm impressed, Sam.
There it is. All right. Well, on behalf of Greg Camarillo, the Miami hero, the two-time Hall of Famer, Christopher Cullen, and myself, the only thing left to say is goodbye from Perfectville.
Later.